Animator and director Bert Klein isn't much different than a lot of artists who work in animation. From an early age, he knew that he wanted to be making cartoons. What sets Mr. Klein apart is he was an animation pro while still a teenager. As a student in Rowland Heights High School animation program, Bert was already working at the cartoon studio Film Roman, and a little while later, he was invited to join the Mouse House's animation staff, where he assisted on Lion King and Pocahontas. Promoted to animator at the ripe old age of 19, Mr. Klein has worked as an animator on Hercules, The Emperor's New Groove, and as a lead animator on Looney Tunes Back in Action, The Simpsons Movie, and Monkey's Tale. He has worked as a director on the shorts Pups of History and Boys Night Out. We spoke in the Animation Guild's conference room on November 7th, 2011. We are talking today to Bert Klein, and Bert, you've been in the business for 20 plus years now,
yeah,
right?
20, going on my 22nd year.
22nd year in the business, and where was your? I'm going to start by saying where was your first job, and then we'll double back to how you got interested in animation. So where was your first job?
My very, very first job, where I was paid professionally, first started off as an internship at Phil Roman's studio right after they moved from Riverside to Chandler. I mean, the paint was still wet when it was in that new building. And based on a student film that I did, this wonderful woman, who's no longer with us, Phyllis Craig.
Phyllis Craig, I knew her.
Phyllis Craig, a lot of us knew her. She's was a huge friend, especially to a lot of young people and to the business. Her and some artists saw my work at a student film festival and showed it to Phil and said, hey, you want to spend 2 weeks at our studio? And I said, would I? I mean, it was wonderful. And, I didn't even drive yet at the time. I was not even 16 years old. I was
you were
15.
just a pup.
I was a child. As a child.
You were still in high school?
I was still in high school. I hadn't turned 16 yet, so my dad drove me to work for those 2 weeks, and it was a wonderful experience. And after 2 weeks, they said, hey, do you want to stay the whole summer? And I said, well, absolutely. And when the whole thing was done, I'll talk more about it in detail later. I mean, to make it my first job, Phil gave me, because I was just a kid, he gave me a very generous savings bond.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he gave
so
me.
So you worked there all summer. Did they pay you for the summer work?
They didn't pay me for the summer. It was at the time it was a non-union place.
What were you sort of doing? PA work or?
No. I mean, I was doing in-betweens on the Tom and Jerry feature. I was learning how to do cleanup. I did cleanup on some Garfield commercials, and just learning from everybody there. I mean, Phil and Phyllis that first summer put me with Art Roman, who is Phil's younger brother, and everybody remembers their first person they put you with, and he taught me, as he said, to be how to do a proper in-between, and from there it just kept going.
Teach you how to flip?
Yeah, and then I was doing in-betweens on the Tom and Jerry movie, and keying some scenes. I was so excited I couldn't even tell you. There was a lot of it's interesting because there was a last gasp of a lot of industry pros that were there that soon retired that I got to meet and talk with, and like Bob Givens, for example. I actually got to,
Bob's now in his 90s.
Yeah, Bob is the funniest thing because, Bob at the time had to have been in his 70s,
right?
I suppose, and he was still active and working, and I'd be sitting with him, and he'd be, half teaching me, things, and the other half telling me about, kids today,
What was he teaching you?
He was, because I was an intern and I was trying to go to different departments to sort of find where to fit. He was teaching me layout.
He was teaching
me some
you
things
layout.
on layout, because that's what he did. He was a layout artist. And, half teaching, half talking about them kids today. Bernie Wolf, who I just met with there. He was still working there, who animated on, Pinocchio. And
my gosh, he went back.
He went way, way back.
What did he tell you?
What did he tell me? I think the thing that he told me that stuck with me, because I think he was having a particularly bad day, because he they tried him out after all that. He hadn't animated for a while, and he did some animation on the feature, and I don't think it was very well received. And he told me, just remember that whatever you do is someone else's opinion, and that if somebody doesn't like your work, someone else will. Which is actually something my dad also told me. They told me separately. I want to stop really quick, but if I could double back for a second.
Sure.
Sure. And give mention my dad, because my dad was instrumental.
Well, let's go back to
We'll go back to the
your
beginning.
upbringing, because
Yeah.
we've sort of talked about your first job, which
Yeah.
we'll come back to.
Yeah, because that continued, and really after the summer, you know, they basically said, hey, you know, until you graduate, if you want to work here summers, whatever, you know, you got a job here.
Oh, wow.
And so the way that really kind of continued, and I don't want to go too far before I double back, is in between the school year and when break came in, that's when they got the Simpsons contract.
Oh, yeah.
And that really was the my real beginning in my career, which was very, very exciting.
Swinging out of The Simpsons when it came to the film rolling studio.
Yeah. It was very exciting because at that time, you know, it was only the third or fourth season. I believe it was the fourth season. All the original directors were still on the show. The show was more popular than ever. There was a lot of excitement there because the shows were so funny. People would listen to the dialogue on their audio cassettes, and people would just be laughing. I mean, just so excited that, you know, they were working on such material.
Yeah.
So I'll pick up there before, in a minute.
But let's go back
I'll go back.
Now, where did you grow up? Was it in L.A.?
Yeah, I grew up in L.A. For the first few years, grew up in Temple City, California, and then later moved to a suburb, Glendora, California. Both in my dad will probably say, you know, you didn't have to say California. My dad would say that to me. My dad would say it. People could have figured that out. But my dad was very, very supportive of me wanting to have an art background.
And when did you get interested in going into art?
Well, I
or
think
animation, for that matter.
the biggest influence for me was when I saw the 1981 special, The Illusion of Life, that was about the making of The Fox and the Hound.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That was my big moment that this is what I wanted to do. And I kept spending, you know, any chance I can trying to figure out how to do animation myself. Whether it was, you know, obviously just drawing or using camcorders to stop frame things. Anything I could to try and figure this out, because, you know, I didn't quite figure out quite how they did it, because, you know, they showed the sequence where, like, you know, they're with Donald Duck and he's the farmer and they take the picture of the cell and then there's another cell. They told you kind of how it was done, but never quite enough.
Yeah.
So
You didn't do the Super 8 one frame at a time kind of a deal.
I wish that I had the Super 8. That would have worked better. I had just a video camcorder where I just kept pressing record and stop, record and stop. So it didn't work, but it was enough, you know, for me to be interested. And let's see, concurrently, there was a computer that just came out at the time called the Amiga computer.
Yeah.
Which was very, very ahead of its time. And I remember seeing a demo of it in an electronics store. And I saw its animation capability, and I thought, this is it. This is something that I could learn how to do animation on, you know, because I was seeing full color animation. So with a lot of asking for a while, my dad got me an Amiga computer, and I started to do animation on it. And concurrently, there was a computer magazine where my dad had discovered that there was an animation program all the way out in Roland Heights, which was about...
Oh, sure. They had a big high school program.
They had a huge high school program, and my dad had discovered it for me because they had just won a contest where they had gotten... See, I had a small little Amiga 500 computer. They had gotten a contest where they had won the big one, the 2500 with all the programs, and my dad says, well, let's go check this place out. And I was still a little too young to join the program, and they had an after-school program. You had to be at least 16 years old.
Yeah.
But my dad talked to the teacher, Dave Master, said, you know,
I knew Dave.
Yeah, and my dad said, look, we're going to come by and visit, and Dave Master said, look, he might be too young, but come by anyway. So when I came by, I was just blown away by what I saw, because at the time I read everything I could on Animation Magazine, and I remember seeing all the advertisements for the big $5,000 Lion Lamb recorder, you know, everything, and somehow they had it. They had everything there. It was amazing.
Roland Heights was a going place.
It was going. Dave Master was a tremendous, and you know, still is, he's still with us, a tremendous promoter, and was able to take the work that the students did and showed it to the studios and the companies and got donations. Because remember, this was a government-funded program.
Sure.
With very little government funds, but he managed to build it into something way beyond by
Slingshot it into the next level.
They had everything. It was amazing, and I just had to be part of this program.
So you went to you trained at the Rowland Heights.
I went to the Rowland Heights program and made lots of films there, and while in high school, and you know, I actually met my future wife there, Jennifer, who works as an animator and a story artist.
Wow.
So pretty much that choice sort of had a huge impact on my life. It was terrific. So based on the work that I did there, which was shown at a film festival, I got the internship at Film Roman. And based on later work, now after I had graduated, I'd worked on The Simpsons over the summer.
This is when you graduated from high school.
Before I graduated. This was the summer of my junior year, right before I graduated, right before my senior year. And I got to work with some great people and learn from them. The original directors. Got to work with Wes Archer, David Silverman, Rich Moore. All those guys were
Mark Kirkland.
Mark Kirkland. I worked with Mark. Mark was wonderful. Taught me a lot of basics, which I still stick with me to this day. Very generous people. And I was working on the shows, and it was amazing. I actually, because of that season being, a lot of people, Simpson aficionados, are always, a lot of them point to the fourth season. I got to work on some pretty iconic episodes and got to, you know, do some animation and layouts that, you know, a lot of Simpsons fans remember fondly. And I was just this kid, and I was having so much fun. You know, it was just terrific. And
you were just working there in the summer.
Right? And actually continued to do freelance while I was still in high school.
Wow.
I was probably like the only kid there. I was thinking, I'm having to do, like, you know, this busy homework, which they give you in high school. I had to do that, and then I'd be drawing The Simpsons at home. And by that time, my parents had gotten me a car, and I would drive down to North Hollywood, and, you know, and eventually I had to stop doing that because the homework got to be too much, and I had to do my homework first. You know, and so as the year progressed, oh yeah, and also it was my
This
last...
is your junior year, right?
My senior year.
Your senior year.
Senior year. And I also, as you could see, I was very focused on animation. I still had to do my film for Dave Masters' class, so, you know, I put the other stuff on side and I focused on Dave Masters' class, because also Phil Roman had told me, you know, had said, hey, when you want a job here, you have a job here, you know, which meant a lot to me, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was great. It was unbelievable. So that was just a wonderful thing. And I finished my film that year, which was a 7-minute pencil test. It's long and boring to watch, but it impressed somebody. It was a pencil test film with animals, because Dave Master was a very smart guy, and this applies today, because we knew that Lion King was in pre-production, and, you know, he was saying, hey, if you're interested in Disney, you might want to do something with realistic animals to show that you can do that.
So that's what you were doing.
And I was partially thinking, well, you know, I kind of have a job waiting for me on Simpsons next year, but you know what, I'll do what he says and see what happens. So I did that. I did that film. And
what were the animals that you used to animate?
Oh, come on, they were lions, of course. They were lions and jungle animals. I mean, you know, you know, and you know what? I'll tell you, to this day, like, sometimes if you're in a portfolio review and you're doing a film about gorillas, and there's two equal portfolios in quality, and one has gorillas and the other one is on something else, you know, you go to the one with the gorillas.
You go with the gorillas.
You go with the gorillas. So that was very smart on Dave Masters' part. So
now you graduate from high school, and
yes.
Then what happens?
Well, prior to graduating, you know, my parents like, well, are you going to go to college? And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, and CalArts took me on a tour there. You know, some people there are familiar with my work, and it sort of seemed destined. Okay, I would go to CalArts. It was also expensive, but I don't know. I'd already had a taste of working professionally, and also being able to make those films at Roland. I just kind of wanted to go back to where I was. So I was all set to go to work on The Simpsons. And at the same studio, Film Roman, one of the directors, who's been a very good friend of mine over the years, Rich Moore, was leaving The Simpsons to go head up The Critic, which was a new show from some Simpsons writers. And his producer called me up at my home where I lived with my parents and said, hey, do you want to work on this? We'll give you such and such money and come on early and do stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'll work with Rich. You know, and then David Silverman was like, work on Simpsons. And, you know, I don't know. I guess I could have worked on Simpsons, but I figured, well, Simpsons will be here forever. Let me try this new show. So, oh yeah, and I did that instead of going to Cal Arts. I forgot. I'm like, you know what?
I'm just going to go full in.
I've always just gone with the wind, you know, and so I went full in, and a lot of fun, very, very exciting. There's a bunch of, at the time, mind you, I hadn't turned 18 yet. I was 17, would be turning 18 in August over the summer. So everybody just was so much older than me. I realize they were, but in retrospect, they were all kids.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they were all kids. They were all all the directors and head people on that show, they were all in their early to mid-20s. But to me, they were old, you know.
Well, they were 4 or 5, 6
they were
years
4 or
older.
5. When you're that young, that's a big gap.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge
it's
gap.
A quarter of your life.
They were, exactly. So I, you know, kind of looked up to them, and you know, they were really good to me and taught me a lot of stuff, and we were having a lot of fun. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, Dave Master had submitted that pencil test film that I had done of the Lions to the Ojai Student Film Festival.
Oh, okay.
Which I was completely unaware of. They had submitted, you know, I don't know if it was just my film, but it was my film and because they were producing some pretty good films out there. My film amongst with others.
Right.
You know, and it was playing at the film festival. And at the time, and Dave Master went to the festival, and by luck, he was sitting next to Eric Goldberg, who at the time had just come off of doing The Genie on Aladdin and was co-directing Pocahontas. And he was sitting next to my teacher, and then they met, and then when it was over, Eric was really, really impressed with the film, and he said, hey, you know, this kid could work here right now. You know, let's, you know, and just all this was going on unbeknownst to me.
This is your lion pencil test.
Yeah, you know, it was a 7-minute film. You know, it had a story and everything, and it was 7 minutes. It was a lot of animation. And
how long did that take to do? It must have taken you a better part of a year.
Yeah, it took me the better part of the year, working constantly. Still managing to graduate high school and keeping up with school. Just, I don't know how I did it, but, you know, my parents were very supportive.
And then, okay, so...
So I'm working one day Okay, so what happened was Eric Goldberg then requested a copy to be shown to the review board at Disney.
Yeah.
Which at the time consisted of, you know, a lot of greats, you know. And so I'm working at Film Roman. At the time, I was sharing an office with Lauren McMullen. I remember where I was.
And you were working on the Critic.
Working on the Critic, doing layout. You know, the line is somewhat blurred between layout and animation on the shows, how they were done then, sort of like now how the line between storyboard and layout is blurred.
Sure.
But, you know, I was working on the show, and I get a call from Bill Matthews from Disney, who at the time was their main recruiter, who I had met through Dave Master before, who was watching my work growing up, and he just called and said, Bert, we saw your film. It was the greatest phone call. We saw your film, and these are the comments that people have said. Glenn Keane said this. John Pomeroy said this. Name after name after name, and it was all it was like, and they said, well, we want you to come here. And I was thinking, well, here I am here working on this show. Phil Roman gave this nobody a job. Rich Moore, who was, you know, kind of like a little bit of a bigger brother figure that I looked up to, kind of took me in, you know, and was teaching me stuff, and, you know, giving me great opportunity. And, you know, I was stupid, and I said, you know, no, I'm happy working here. And I said, I'll talk to you later. And there was another...
Oh, you'd been there, what, 2 or 3 months at that point?
Not that long. Not that long at all. No. I was in the middle of a season, you know, maybe 3-4 months. I was in the middle of a season.
Yeah.
You know, and then another good friend of mine who I still believe was working at Film Roman at the time, Mike Humphreys. They had a lot of great people working there.
Oh, I know Mike.
He said to me, Disney gave you a job and you turned them down. Are you crazy? You know, and I'm like, well, okay, let me at least talk to them. So I didn't tell anybody at work. You know, I felt like I secretly met with them, and at the time, it was amazing that like he was meeting with a pisher like me, but it was like Tom Schumacher, and I think it was and some other executive person were meeting with me saying, you know, we want you. What are you, crazy? You're not taking this offer? And I'm like, they gave me the hard sell, and I think before I left, I had
agreed to go to
I'd
work?
agreed to go there. And probably then the next day went and signed a contract for 5 years, you know. And then I was thinking, what have I done? And you know, I would say that the folks on the Critic, because whenever you leave a job mid-season, since I've had later experience, you know, another place is having positions of responsibility where you have to get stuff out, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess, you know, some of the directors are really relying on me a lot at the time, that when you quit a job midway, it's not looked on well. So that was my first experience of having something I had done not looked on well.
Now, were they ticked off when you walked in and said, oh, I just signed a contract with Disney, bye?
Very ticked off. But they got over it, but they didn't let me off easy. And they played an elaborate prank on me.
What did they do?
Well, I was gullible, just as anybody would be. And on my last day there, they were all going to go out to lunch with me. And they took me to lunch. And, you know, I think it's funny because I don't know if it quite was what they intended, because I had a miserable lunch because of the prank they played on me. I don't know if that's what they wanted, but maybe it was. But one of the directors at the time, Dan Jupe, who I'd worked with, who was I worked at Disney, he did a dead on Bill Matthews impression, like nothing you've ever heard.
Yeah.
So they were all. Is there a way to pause this thing in case you need to use the restroom? Or
oh, sure. If you need to go, that's fine. We can just. Are you okay right now?
I'll finish this story so the whole world can know that I needed to use the restroom. I'll finish the story before my bathroom break. But Dan Jupe did a dead-on Bill Matthews impression. I'm sure they were all in some office somewhere laughing at this phony phone call. He called me up to say that basically this job, it went away. I wasn't going to have it. And you know.
and so let me get this.
I'd already signed
You've signed a contract, and now they say the contract's null and void, and you're not coming.
And I quit my job.
And you've quit your job, and so you're going. So you're probably in shock.
I am in shock. So I have this lunch. I was a kid. I was very upset.
I can understand that.
Very upset.
If you were 25 or 30, you'd be upset.
Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, so then later, I remember where I was. I was using the restroom after lunch thinking, what am I going to do? And Dan Jupe's in there, and he comes in and he goes, Bert, I got to let you off the hook. Then he started doing the same Bill Matthews impression that I heard on the phone. And I swear, a rage inside me, I started shaking him. I grabbed him by the shirt because Dan, you know, started shaking Dan. You know, we all had a laugh, and that was my send off to Disney, and that's where my Disney career began.
So you left the Critic in mid-season, and you started at Disney. And what year was that?
That would have been in. Let's see.
94?
No, 93.
93?
Fall,
okay.
Yeah. So let's do a little pause, and then I will.
Let's pause there, and then we'll pick it up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for.
No, it's fine. And we're rolling. We'll just snip.
We're rolling. Well,
we're rolling again. So.
Thank you for indulging me.
So after Mr. Jupe had his moment of levity with you, you. Shook him, told him you were ticked off.
I was ticked off. We were laughing. You know, I couldn't help but laugh over it, and I have to admit I had a little bit of relief that it was indeed a joke. But, you know, when you're that young, and I know I was very young, and it wouldn't make any sense that a signed contract would be null and void. It was a very good impression. I mean, he sounded exactly like Bill.
So you bought it hook, line, and sinker because you're young and impressionable.
I was young and impressionable, and it was such a good impression. I could not imagine somebody sounding so much like somebody and not being them. So there you go. So
anyway, you bop over to Disney's, you leave the Critic, and so what's your first impression experience at the House of Mouse?
interesting, slightly different than sort of on my meeting with people bringing me and they're saying, oh, we want you to be our next Andreas Deja and all this stuff, and making me like all these promises saying, oh, you'll be one of our top animators, just feeding me lots of stuff. And the first my first day there, I have a little dingy cube with a small white desk, an in-betweener's desk, and I thought I would be learning how to animate. And they put me, I started in cleanup. Because what I didn't realize was that back in those days, and it's funny that they were those days.
This is the mid-'90s.
Yeah, it was still early 90s, it was 93, that even when you came in on the outside, very rarely did you come in, training to animate. Just like they figured if you had the potential to animate, we'll put you in cleanup, and if you're meant to fight your way out of it, you will.
Oh, I see.
Meaning that if you did a very good job in cleanup, you could very well stay there. But but what I didn't realize, well, maybe I did realize. You know what I did realize? That I put two and two together. Because here I was, and I was working. My mentor was a wonderful woman, Renee Holt, who was one of the best cleanup artists in the business. I think she's retired. I wish she would still continue to work.
Big, tall, attractive woman.
Yes.
And very funny.
Very funny, and one of the best artists you could work with. But it was very good because they were trying to like teach me like really like how the pure basics of animation, even though it was cleanup, like drawing straights against curves, appeal, mass, volume, all that stuff. But at the same time, all around me, I was on Pocahontas, and it was, like you said, one of those slower times where they were ramping up and getting the story back, because the story had just gone back to square one. But all around me, literally, I sat within an earshot of Glenn Keane, Duncan Marjoribanks, John Pomeroy, all these giants of animation that were not on Lion King. They were on Pocahontas.
Yeah.
So what I realized...
Because Lion King was just finishing at the time you started there, right?
Lion King was getting towards the end run. And at the time, I realized, you know what, this is a real opportunity here. So I had like access to all these guys while doing my in-between work.
Yeah.
I was doing these tests, these animation tests, and just showing it to them and just working with them and getting better and better. It was entirely unofficial, but I was just plopped with all these guys so I realized that's kind of like how it is. They just kind of throw you in there, and if you just kind of sit there and do nothing will happen, and if you do something will happen.
So you were sort of proactive and got into it.
Yeah, you have
So were you running a personal test at the same time you're doing cleanup and all that stuff?
And that's how it's done. I mean, they don't tell you that, but that's how it's done.
Yeah.
So I was doing lots of personal tests, and also was able to, at the time, to get Lion King done. The Pocahontas crew was helping out on cleanup, and I joined and did cleanup on Lion King.
So you were getting a little of your lion background into work.
Yep, it was not. It's funny, yeah, because I'd animated this whole film with lions, and I'm doing lion in betweens, and it was great. And I did not get credit on the film, I think, because we were working on it in another building, and we were down the street. And at the time, you were to look at the board to see if your name was on there for the credits, and I just kind of slipped through the cracks. So of all the films not to get a credit on, that was probably the wrong one, but I did work on it, and I'm happy to say that I did.
Well, what the hey? You worked on it. How long were you on it? For 4 months, 5 months?
Yeah, not long. But everyone else who was on it towards the end got a credit, but I just didn't pay attention, and that's another thing. You have to be proactive,
right?
Because
if you had gone, they probably would have given you an in-betweeners credit.
Yeah, say that again.
Cleanup credit.
If I what?
You would have, if you had gone and made an issue
Oh
of it.
yeah. The point is I didn't. I just was I didn't think about it. Oh yeah, I would have gotten a credit if I'd made an issue, but I just didn't think about it. The follies of youth.
It's only in retrospect. Damn, I should have done that.
Yeah, youth. It's fine. Youth folly. Let's see. Back on Pocahontas, still doing tons and tons of personal tests. I was loaned out to.
So what were some of those personal tests? What was the one that sticks in your memory?
Oh, well, I'll get to that in a second. But the first ones I did, just stuff with classic characters. Classic characters that I always would have wanted to animate, but, was not around during that time. Mr. Smee, Captain Hook, all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
Just fun stuff. Personal tests. So I helped out, my first credit there was on the Goofy movie that was being done in France, and they were loaning out the Pocahontas cleanup crew after Lion King, because Pocahontas was still slow going. So I was part of a little cleanup unit working on the Goofy movie, doing cleaning up some of the work of the French animators. Beautiful work they did. I thought their roughs were gorgeous, and I was doing that, still doing personal tests, and lo and behold, they announced a contest, Disney loves contests, to become a trainee animator. They called it animating assistant, which is kind of like a misnomer because it sounds like assistant animator, but what it really is an apprentice animator where you're animating on the production. So there was a test, a big everybody in cleanup was taking that test, and it was a hard test. You had to animate Pocahontas getting out of a boat and saying dialogue, using photostats, and you also had an opportunity to include your personal tests as well for the whole package. Everyone was working on that test. I worked on it. It was hard for me because, I was never done a realistic human before. Worked at it, and submitted the tests, waiting to hear the results. And I was called in, and I did not make it.
Really?
I did not make it.
Must have been a shock.
Well, I wouldn't want to say it was a shock, but nobody likes to hear the bad news when you work hard on something and you didn't make it. But there was a but attached to it. But they didn't feel like I was ready for this. But just the Baker Bloodworth, the associate producer, called me up and said, we don't feel you're ready for this, but we want you to be a rough in-betweener. So that means I was out of cleanup.
So you're on the animation
You're on the
track.
animation track, and what a rough in-betweener does is basically you work with the animators, the rough animators, doing either rough in-betweens or in some cases whatever else they want you to do.
Right.
Maybe they'll leave some animation off. Maybe they kind of want to take an extra long lunch and give you a shot at animating one of the characters and see what happens.
Just like it was back in the good old days.
It was just, so basically you had an opportunity to, do stuff, and it was great. And so that was a big shot in the arm.
Now, who are you rough in-betweening for?
At first, everybody, and what had happened is John Pomeroy's rough in-betweener, really nice, helpful guy named Dave Hancock, he was promoted to animating assistant. So John Pomeroy was looking for a new guy to follow him up. And that was a tall order because John's drawings were gorgeous, and he left a lot for the assistant to do, and it was daunting. And he tried me out, and I gave it my all, and just continued from there. And, I was essentially his assistant, where, anything he needed I would do, even if it was like, maybe taking care of a phone call for him, or something. He only did that once, but, pegging stuff up. But essentially what it was is I would take his beautiful, beautiful John Smith keys and do all the breakdowns and rough in-betweens. Mm-hmm. And that was John was a big I loved his work that he had done on the video games and Dragon's Lair and Secret of Nim, so I was very, very excited because all the top animators had their assistant, and I did that with John. Mm-hmm. But I also realized though that doing that was not the same as animating, so I kept it up and was doing a rough test. And Eric Goldberg, who was the guy who got me in there in the first place, was directing. And I figured, you know what? I'm going to show him some of my stuff. So what I did is the APM at the time, Stephanie Parker, wonderful woman, she actually let me sign up on director time with the rest of the animators and meet with Eric and show him my work.
Wow.
And Eric started to give me like notes and said, okay, well, you did this, now try this. And he was always like raising the bar for tests that I would do. Like if I just did a simple test of a character talking, he'd be like, no, get him up and get him to be physical and walk around and do this and pick it up and, just to like really show what you can do.
Raise your game.
Yeah, exactly. To raise my game. And I did it, and I kept coming to him, and then finally when I had enough stuff, I submitted again for that position, animating assistant. Even though it wasn't an official contest at the time,
right.
You could still submit anytime. So I did. And I want to say a good friend of mine there, Press Romanillos, who is unfortunately no longer with us, very, very supportive of me from day one there.
Sure.
And I had to turn in a new portfolio in addition to my animation because they wanted to see your life drawings. And I'd been putting all my time in animation tests.
So you had few life drawings.
I had few life drawings except for the stuff that got me in there in the first place. I think so, or what I had before. So I crammed and was just trying to get my portfolio together. And I think I was right before I was about to submit. I was there till about 4 or 5 in the morning, and Press was still there working on his Pocahontas animation. And I showed it to him, and I said, Press, could you take a look at this? And he looked at my life drawings, and he said, okay, keep this one, throw this one out, keep this one. And he had taken out so many, I was about one short. But then he took one of the ones that he took out, and the only thing wrong with it is something like with the wrist or the arm. He says, here, don't tell anyone this. And he took an eraser, and he rubbed out the arm, and he fixed my arm for me.
Your arm.
He fixed my arm for me. And, I'm revealing that secret now. And that was...
I think the statute of limitations
The statute of limitations have run out, and that was such a wonderful act of kindness. So, fast forward. That's sort of like, in a nutshell, my training to be an animator.
Now, when this is all going on with Eric, you're still assisting
oh, yeah, I'm
Mr.
doing my day job, having to do my day job. You could not be caught... if you were caught doing your personal test while you were supposed to be doing your day job, that was a major faux pas. So I did it at home, after hours, all sorts of stuff. Because when you're that young, that's what young people do. You don't have anything to worry about, So I made it. I made it. Said, okay, congratulations, you made it.
And you must be all of about 19 or 20 at this point, right?
19. I was 19. So...
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible. And so Eric Goldberg was finishing up Pocahontas, and he wanted to go back to animating for a picture because he loved working with Ron and John. And I talked to him, and I said, okay, I'm sure he already knew all this stuff because I'm sure he was at the review. At least I'm assuming he was. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But I talked to him, and I said, he probably was, and I said to him, well, look, I got this promotion. This Pocahontas was just about over. How about working? I could be your animator. I could train with you. And he said, I'd love to do that.
And he's at this point directing on Hercules,
finishing up directing Pocahontas.
Oh yeah, he's direct. That's right.
And he went on to be, and he was going to be a supervising animator on Hercules. And boy, working and getting to that was such a. Oh, that was so exciting to realize that I was going to be able to work right under him. And so the way that it went was it was a year program of which you animated on the film and had periodic reviews every 3 months. And, I think they gave you a year and a lot of time because they needed animators. And it was a great time to get in because you can tell when you're being given opportunities to succeed. And definitely...
Hand-drawn animation was red hot at the period.
Hand-drawn animation was red hot. And I skipped Hunchback and went on to Hercules during early times in pre-production. So about 6 months after doing... was it 6 months? Actually, no. There were scenes. I was animating production scenes on Hercules under Eric. Just working as an animator, but, you're not called one yet. And
right.
That position still exists to this day. It was so exciting, so much fun. Wonderful memories during those times. And after 6 months after my review, they said, okay, you're an animator. So that was very, very exciting, and I was hadn't even turned 20. I was 19.
You're 19 and a full-fledged
I
animator.
I was an animator. It was amazing. So
Keep going.
I'll keep going. You're walking around here. That was a milestone. So I was very excited. Had a blast on that film on Hercules, and a little.
What were you What character you were animating? Eric's.
On Eric's, I was
characters?
animating on Eric's character, which was Phil, the little goat man, which was a lot of fun.
Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito guy. And probably spoiled. I mean, my first film as an animator, I'm getting to work with Eric Goldberg and have Ron and John be the directors. You can't get any better than that. Ron and John are.
It's a nice film.
Nice film, tough act to follow. You know, it turned out to be a nice film. I'm not saying anything bad about the film. I would say that 6 months before it came out, we had a screening, and it was so good. I mean, I really felt like we had just worked on the next Aladdin. And then somehow there were budget cuts and editing cuts, and the film got trimmed and changed at the last minute. And I still think it's a good film, but
You liked it better that 6 months out.
It fell short of being the next Aladdin. It was up. It would have been up there with Aladdin, and no offense to Ron, maybe. Well, I love you, Ron and John. I still think it's a great film, but I think it fell short of Aladdin.
What was taken out? What can you even remember?
It was interesting because basically it was just all sorts of stuff. It was basically a global changes throughout the film.
They needed to get the running time down, huh?
Yeah, anyway. But still a good film, fun time. The next film, I had to kind of fly on my own a little bit because, Eric, he's a great person to work under because, you can really rely on him to make you look good. And then I started working on some other productions after Hercules. After Hercules, I went on to Mulan. That was being done in Florida at an LA unit out here.
So you stayed in LA. You didn't go down to.
No, I didn't go down to Florida.
Orlando.
I visited. Yeah, I visited for 2 weeks, but so I worked on the LA unit on Mulan.
What did you animate on that?
A bit of everything, grab bag. Probably just we were just the help out crew. So
whatever needed to be done.
Whatever needed to be done, we did. And then after Mulan, that crew, who was not on Tarzan, went on to Kingdom of the Sun.
Oh, so you swung right into Kingdom of the Sun and you skipped Tarzan.
No, not quite, because then when we went on to Kingdom of the Sun, we worked on that for a year and a half. And anyone that saw the movie The Sweatbox knows what happened.
Oh, yeah. So you did a lot of experimental animation that ended up
No, it wasn't. It was real. I mean, it was production. I mean, that Kingdom was about like 45% animated, something huge. They were real scenes.
And then they scrapped the whole thing and started over.
And I'm trying to remember what came first. What came first, Rhapsody or Tarzan? I'm trying to remember. Please forgive me.
You're forgiven.
My mind.
Well, you worked on both of them, right?
I worked on Tarzan for 6 months. So either before the real animation on Kingdom or after, it might have been before. I helped out on the end of Tarzan. Everyone worked on that movie, and I animated for 6 months on that. Just whatever needed to be done.
So you didn't have any specific character. You just jumped around to what was needed to be done.
Yeah, I mean pretty much. Yeah.
Did you have any favorite pieces that you did in that?
Let's see. In Tarzan, I did one very long.
That's a terrific film.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, there's one very long scene that I did. It's very long, and I did Professor Porter and the Apes. It's a scene where Porter first meets the apes, and they're hanging him upside down, and he goes, "Oh,
yeah.
Pleased to meet you, Archimedes." I look at it now and I cringe. I mean, I was very, very green. Q Porter at your service. And then they drop him and they're tickling him and he's laughing. It was just it was a very nice.
It's a great scene.
Well, I can't even look at. I mean, I was very green, but yeah. I got to animate that scene, and there were some gorillas in it. I did one of the gorillas with him, but it was mostly a Porter scene. I shared that one with Chris Wall, who did some of the other miscellaneous gorillas in it. But yeah, that was probably the standout bit I got to do on Tarzan, amongst other non-standout bits.
Right.
I don't know. It's all in the opinion. Like you'll say it's a great scene, and I'll say I didn't know what I was doing. You know.
Well, you might, yeah, but from your see, you're going from your perspective, which is what I knew then to what I know now.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it from uh, an audience member's perspective of just saying,
Hey,
there's a lot of entertainment there.
Hey, it's in the movie. So yeah, I did that, and yeah, little bits in Mulan that were memorable. You know. Then let's see what happened next. I would say the next big memorable thing that I got to do was Eric at the time was on Fantasia 2000
Right.
and was directing on that, and
Doing Rhapsody in Blue.
Rhapsody in Blue, and pretty much using the Kingdom crew to do it. And I was the first animator on that, getting to work with my mentor Eric Goldberg again on that.
And that's kind of stylized, so that's
Very,
a different
very
kind of
stylized.
different.
Oh yeah, and Eric, Eric knows me, and I know him. We've had a very, very close working relationship. My very, very first attempts at something aren't always right on, but I work at it till I get it, and I got it pretty well. And when all's said and done, I think I did the math. I mean, I think I animated about just shy of 25% of Rhapsody. I animated the bulk. Well,
You had more footage than anybody else.
than anybody, probably even Eric. Yeah, I mean, probably in my standout pieces, I animated most of the sequence of the Rockefeller Center where they're ice skating and the ice skaters and other bits throughout, and that was very complex stuff, and that was a wonderful time. And I realized that Eric, what he was really doing is the next project. I don't think any of this could be cut because some people know this is just kind of what happened. But Eric was going to direct his version of the Frog Prince at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Which later, became Princess and the Frog.
Well, he ended up being a directing animator on it when it was finally made.
Yes, when it was finally made. Because as we know at Disney, projects often don't go away forever. But Eric was going to direct Princess and the Frog. Frog Prince, and he wanted me to, which I did a test on for part of the presentation. He wanted me to supervise one of the main characters on it. So he was giving me a lot to do on Rhapsody to see if I could handle all that stuff.
Right.
And I did. So I was all set to go on to that. That was going to be my big break as a supervising animator. And things looked like they couldn't have been going better because Eric and his crew they boarded the first act, and you know what? It was good. It was very, very good.
Wow.
It was excellent. It was like for a first pass, it was one of the best first passes of a feature I had ever seen. And we had a big first screening, and before it they showed my animation test that I had done on the main, not the main character, but one of the main characters, because we had done some experimental animation.
Yeah.
And you know what? We were all smiles because everyone was laughing. You couldn't have had a better screening. It was great. So I went back to my desk, and an hour later, Eric calls me and said, "It's over. They canned it."
Really?
Yep.
Well, that happened, but you want to know something?
Happens all the time.
That story has been repeated through 60 or 70 years of
Yep.
the...
Disney, yet another Disney tragedy. But I'll say for the record, for anyone that's listening, for where I saw it, it was very, very good. It was not... There was always reasons that things happen, but it was not for lack of its quality of a feature, because it was excellent.
It was probably Tom Schumacher didn't want to make it, or whoever.
Well, you know what? We may never know, and it was all part of God's plan. But
that's showbiz.
I'm just going on record saying it was excellent, and it would have been.
Well, at some point, some of that might see the light of day. You never know.
Who knows? Anyway. So we've moved on.
So what happened after that?
So after that, just in time, let's see. Kingdom of the Sun had been retooled as Emperor's New Groove, and so I went right back onto that and worked as an animator on that.
So what was your main character on that?
Well, I worked on on that. Yeah, since Hercules, I was the first. Because the other two films I was helping out on, I animated on a Bruce Smith's unit on Pacha, and. I wanted to be on Pacha because I was really, really impressed with Bruce Smith's work on Kerchak, and in general, Bruce is who I work with now today. I see him every day. Who's an icon in animation.
He's directed.
Oh, yeah.
He's done television
Well, Bruce.
creation.
Oh, I
He's
love his
done
drawings.
everything.
Bruce is like, it's funny. He's actually somebody that will say, you've made it when people will hire you to do something in the Bruce Smith style rather than hire Bruce Smith. You know what I mean? Like, he has a style that people will say is the Bruce Smith style. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
you've made it.
It's,
So
it's like if you're an actor, get me a Robert De Niro type.
Yeah.
Rather than getting Robert De Niro.
Yeah. So I worked with him and I learned a lot and animated a lot of scenes of the Pacha character on that film. And then what happened next after that? Oh yeah, and worked with Mark Dindal, very nice guy. What happened after that picture? I'm trying to remember. Now, mind you, it was a disappointment because I was all primed to get to supervise my first character, and then that just went away. And what happened next?
Well, the next thing I think that happened is there was Home on the Range.
No, I forgot Treasure Planet. So
Treasure Planet with Ron and John.
Yeah, so I get a chance to work with Ron and John again, and there was a lot of excitement at the time because Glenn Keane had been in Paris.
Working on the Tarzan.
Doing the Tarzan crew, and he was coming back here to supervise a character. So, I talked to Glenn, who hadn't worked with me in years. I mean, he had just remembered me as a trainee up and coming animator, and then he left. So he wasn't really around when I had started animating, but he came back, and he gave me a shot, and I was one of the animators on Long John Silver. And it's funny. I'd say my career at Disney is more defined on the great people I got to work with as opposed to what I really did myself. I mean, I got to work with Glenn and Eric and
John Pomeroy.
And also, I got to work briefly worked with Andreas a little bit. He was the first supervising animator on Yzma when it was Kingdom of the Sun. The name of that character is one of the few things that held over, and the basic concept of that character. Dale Bear took it over. I got to animate a little bit of Yzma with Andreas, which was a blast. Not much, just a little. What else happened? So anyway, my next big challenge there was, okay, you be careful what you ask for. I'm like, okay, you're going to get to animate on one of Glenn's characters and be part of his unit. Can you do it? And
that was a tough character because it was part CGI and.
Oh yeah, he was tough. Drawing that was well beyond what my ability was. But you know what? I did it. I made it through. I think Ron Clements is really supportive of me on the character. He liked the work I was doing because it was tough because everybody wanted to work with Glenn, and I was fortunate that I got to, because there were other people that wanted to that might have been a good buddy of mine. A friend of mine was probably more suited to work on that character than me, but Glenn gave me a shot, and so I got to have that experience.
Well, and you came through.
And it was, something was telling me, who knows what the future is, but, when was that? That was in 2001, 2000, and I'm thinking...
Right around the turn of the century.
And here we are in, 2011, and, that's the last time Glenn had a unit of animators, of traditional animators. Maybe he'll have one again in the future. Who knows? Who knows what the future will bring, but the point is,
that was Glenn's, as far as we know today.
As far as we know.
That was Glenn's last traditional animation unit.
As far as we know today, that was it. It could change, but as far as we know to this point, that was kind of like a last gasp opportunity to feel what it was like to work with Glenn. And one of the best bosses I've had and one of the toughest. I've never done stuff over and over and over and over again, but was able to get results that I wouldn't have gotten without him pushing me.
So you felt that his leadership was kind of pivotal in moving it through.
Of course. I mean, he's an icon for a reason. I mean, the thing I would say about Glenn is, as far as like his role as like a directing animator, he really is that good. I mean, how good is he? Yeah, he's that good.
What kind of stuff does he do as a directing animator?
Well, a lot of stuff. I mean, I would say that, well, I don't know. Maybe on other, what kind of stuff does he do? Well,
when you go in and you to show him,
first of all, he's always pivotal in the story. Oh, you mean to work with?
Yeah.
Well, to work with, yeah. Well, what he does is, he's very, very generous in that he tries to make it a point to hand out continuity of scenes for each of his animators to do. So you're not just doing a bit here or a bit there. So you get whole sections to do. And then what he wants you to do is then build on the storyboard and then take where it is and then go through the whole sequence and not necessarily reboard it, but do thumbnails and just keep mining and mining and mining what it can be, which doesn't always go along with production because they just want a shot out of you every week. But Glenn would be like, no, take this week or two and we'll work together to make this thing more. And then it pays off because then once it's all figured out, the stuff gets done. But it was about it wasn't just about, well, just take what's there and execute it. Let's make this thing more. Let's push it.
So he was like a partner. He was.
Oh, he's wonderful. A partner, but at the same time, not the kind of partner that lets nothing slide. I mean, if there was still any breath or any chance that you could make changes or make the scene better, you were doing that until it was taken away, and it was great. And
that was for about a year, right? Year and a half?
Year and a half, almost 2 years maybe. It was it felt like a long production.
Yeah.
So I just worked on nothing else but working with him on that character. And, there was a pretty big unit on that. And, I certainly struggled here and there, but it was a great experience. So after that, there was going to be Home on the Range coming up. At the time it was called Sweating Bullets. And it's funny, for that brief 2-year period, my wife was working at the studio as an animator. She had animated on New Groove. That was the only picture we worked on together. I mean, we were on separate units. She worked on Cusco. Then she went over on Sweating Bullets, and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do here? Just trying to figure it out. And there was an opening to learn CG animation to be an animator on this project, which Hendel Butoy was directing, called Mickey's PhilharMagic.
I remember that. That went on for quite a while.
Yeah, which is a theme park show. I think it's very popular in Florida. And I threw my hat in the ring for that. And because when I was a kid with that Amiga computer, I did a lot of stuff with 3D graphics, so I was always into it. And I gave it a shot, and I did the training. And then I became an animator on Mickey's PhilharMagic and animated some very complex shots on that. And I knew Chicken Little was coming up, and they were kind of doing pre-production on Chicken Little in the North Side building where I was at doing PhilharMagic. And I was working on a scene in PhilharMagic with Donald Duck that was going, I thought it was pretty interesting what was going on with it. So I knew Mark, Dindal, and Randy, and I said, hey, next time you guys are here, stop by to my office and I'll show you what I'm doing. And they were really impressed with my CG animation, and they were just thinking of Chicken Little at the time.
And they knew that was going to be in CG.
Yeah.
That was the first
full-bore
CG animated feature.
So, little time goes by, I get a call from the associate producer that's saying, hey, we're doing a test on this character. That's going to be kind of like the first test out on Chicken Little. Do you want to do it? And, and I said, sure. And they also told me that they wanted to cast me on Chicken Little as a supervising animator.
Wow.
Which was very exciting. I was like, wow. They said, yeah, go to a screening and keep in mind of a character. And I thought, wow, this is great. Now, mind you, this is just coming from Mark and Randy. At the time, though, politics were very, very heavy there. And being a traditional person going over to the CG side, I didn't realize quite what a stranger in a strange land I was. And as far as to who was going to be the supervising animators on that film, and who was going to be doing what, there was a very different opinion between the CG leadership on that show and what Mark and Randy had talked to me about.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay.
Without getting into specifics, the heat got hot in the kitchen, and it was not a comfortable place for me to be anymore. It was not comfortable.
So you worked on the picture, or you didn't work on the picture?
Well, no, I didn't. I did the opening test bit. And then just at the time, I figured, well, I've been here about 9 years, going on 10. And Eric Goldberg, who had left a few years ago, was going to be the animation director on Looney Tunes Back in Action, which was a sequel to Space Jam.
Yeah, yeah. I remember it well.
Which was a big hit. Space Jam was a big hit, not Looney Tunes Back in Action. And it was essentially like I got an offer to be his first supervising animator on that picture and kind of be his right hand on it as far as animation goes. And, it was, the money was great. And I knew it was just for one picture, but I'm like, okay, well, I can finally get this position to be a supervising animator.
Yeah, yeah.
Work with my pal Eric. And then I'm being offered that here, but I don't even know if it will continue because things are kind of hot over here, because in anything that I'm mentioning, nobody there works there anymore.
Well, all of the management that you were dealing with at the time, they're all gone.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily like executive management. It was, they were our, like they were artists, but it was a different. It was the regime there changes constantly, but it just wasn't a comfortable place for me to be. So I left, and Mark and Randy were not happy about me leaving. It was another time where I had to leave, and they said, well, whatever. I mean, I left, and because at the time there were not very many traditional people that switched over to CG, and now everyone does it, but it was a little bit different back then. So I left, and I
went to work for Eric.
Went to work for Eric at Warner's and had a blast. So much fun. Warner's was so much fun, and at the time, it was just getting to work with all my friends again because Home on the Range, it just had its layoffs, and they had all the best animators, and we just had a blast.
What was it like working on all those? Because you've come from Disney, and now you're working on all these iconic Warner Brothers characters, which are considerably different than a lot of the iconic
very
Disney
different
characters.
Well, regardless of how the film did, or the live action, or the script, or anything that anybody does not like about that film, I will say that I think Eric's direction of the animation and the handling of those characters is amazing.
It's really good.
It's very, very good. It was it's excellent, and it was fun. The movie was what it was, but we were locked into it. The live action was shot, and the animation was
sort of tied to the live action.
Tied to the live action, and it was a blast to do. In between that, a couple interesting things happened. Let's see. Looney Tunes was about to end, and my wife and I had gone on vacation to New Zealand about a year before and fell in love with the place, and my wife was a Lord of the Rings nut. And I thought, how cool would it be to work on Lord of the Rings, to do CG animation.
That's right. You were with Weta for a...
Yeah. So...
How did that come about?
After, just like anything, you know what's going on, and you talk to the people, doing it, and, like anything, you see what's going on, and you put your stuff together and put your best foot forward, and if it works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And after Looney Tunes, I went to New Zealand, and I worked as a CG animator. In between that, after Looney Tunes, Eric was going to direct the Bloom County feature with Opus the Penguin.
Yeah.
And it was going to be for the Weinsteins, and they commissioned a 1-minute test, of which Eric directed. Burt Breathed was very involved in it, and myself and some friends animated. I did the bulk of not the bulk, over half, I don't remember.
A goodly amount.
A goodly amount of CG animation on it of Opus the Penguin. And, the Weinsteins loved it, and somehow the film just never happened.
Financing fell through.
Who knows? I don't know. I was not involved with that part, but that's showbiz.
So this is after you've done the test and after you finished with Eric on the Warner Brothers feature.
Yeah, I actually finished the test, strangely enough, after I went to New Zealand. I finished it on my laptop in my hotel room while I was working on Lord of the Rings.
So what did you do on Lord of the Rings?
Bit of everything, nothing of really note. I kind of realized that once I got there, I was kind of one of the last hires on it, and all the memorable stuff, the stuff with Gollum and the personality, that had all been cast, and I helped out on the battle sequences with, herd of elephants and horses and spears and all sorts of stuff, You know,
So how long were you on Lord of the Rings?
Not
Was that
very-
the first one?
the third one,
The third one? Okay, it was number
Return
3.
of the King, about 9 months, and I went back home after that.
How did you like New Zealand while you were there?
New Zealand's a gorgeous country. A gorgeous country. It's interesting though. Oh God, I totally skipped over something else too. It inspired an animated film that Jennifer and I made, because as gorgeous of a country as New Zealand is, you realize that it's not entirely a free country. You know, it's a socialist country, of which, you know, you have no choice there. There's only one telephone system, one internet provider, one everything.
Yeah.
Which inspired a film we did. So anyway, backtracking a little bit. So mind you, my wife and I were married. We didn't have kids, so we just, our lives was animation. You know, that was our focus. And when I was at Disney's, when I first started there, I made one of my first friends there was Teddy Newton, who was very young and very talented. And
What did he do?
he's a story guy. He left Disney. His most recent thing is he directed I think he was nominated for an Oscar, Day and Night.
Oh,
for
yeah,
Pixar.
up at Pixar.
Yeah, he's a Pixar guy now. And while I was working at Disney, he had boarded a joke sequence for Brad Bird's Iron Giant that no one would ever use or ever touch. That was a joke sequence where the villain had taken Hogarth to a strip joint, and it was just sort of like a completely like off-color like joke sequence, like a gag drawing that no one would use. And it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. So we got together and said, you know, it's a shame that this will never see the light of day because it's completely off-color. And I was a lot younger at the time, and this was, you know, this is certainly in a more foolish time in my life, a time before I found God, you know, and we made the film. And I said, let's make this film, and we called it Boys Night Out, and you know, we did it together.
So it's the drop sequence from Iron
Giant. We changed characters around, changed the name, and it's basically about a stepdad who doesn't want to watch his kid, and he takes him to a strip club. And and somebody put it on YouTube, and it's getting tons and tons of views. And you know, it's very popular on there. At the same time, now that I have kids, and I can't necessarily advocate doing that. I consider it a folly of youth. But we did that, and it was nominated for an Annie Award.
Oh, all right.
And I got a lot of, you know, I animated most of it. Eric Goldberg helped out. He animated
How long is it?
about 6 minutes.
And
It was
what's
in
the name
full color,
of it?
called Boys Night Out.
Oh, Boys Night Out. Okay.
Boys Night Out. And Eric animated a couple amazing shots on it. People can always tell them because they're so much better than everyone else's. So Teddy and I directed that together, and we were very excited. You know, put our own money into it. Because, hey, we didn't have any responsibilities at the time. And it was nominated for an Annie Award. And we lost to Bounden. The Academy didn't like it. But yeah, you know, when you'll see it, it's just not, you know, it's an off color. It's not as vulgar as it's not like a Bakshi piece, but it's more like that than anything.
Oh, that's all right. You know, it's
Yeah.
of its time.
It was of its time, of my youth, my follies. So that was our first Annie nomination. That was very exciting. And a little bit of trivia, which most people don't know, is that before Teddy moved up to Pixar, he had come up with the idea for Day and Night, and that was going to be our next film that we were going to make together.
So he did that.
independently.
He actually developed that before he went to Pixar.
It was a rough concept. I remember we were having dinner at, it's now called Moe's, it was called Hampton's, and he got a napkin, and we just started, he just started sketching out this concept of these two guys, and we're like, okay, great, let's do that next. You know, and then, you know, he moved and I moved, and, you know, you go on with your lives, and he ended up making it at Pixar, and it's a terrific film.
And he's been up there for some years now.
For some years, yes. Let's see. Let me wrap my head around things. So, I come back from New Zealand. First thing that happens is, you know, Boys Night Out. It for that year. It got nominated for the Annie Award. And then I had to find a job, and I just started because I was so used to, you know, well, after I left Disney, I'm like, I have no job. I got to find something to do. So I just started like picking up whatever I could anywhere. I was actually freelancing, animating commercial scenes for, what's his name? Chuck Gamage in Canada, which was very bizarre because it was Canada outsourcing to an American person.
Yeah, that happens from time to time.
Yeah.
I've even heard of people subcontracted Canada from here, and then Canada subcontracts the same work back to Los Angeles.
Very possible that that's what was happening, but it was fun. I worked on some, Trix Rabbit, Rice Krispies, some fun stuff, and I was doing some consulting work at a CG place, but no real job. And then something came up, their next animation work was going to be the animation sequences for the live-action Fat Albert movie.
Oh, okay.
Which, I believe your wife Janet, I think she was working there around the same time.
Yeah, she worked on that.
That she was there.
She was a stalwart at Warner Brothers for several years.
I remember her cube there. And so they were looking for an animation director to work at Warner's and direct the animation sequences. And the interview process was very lengthy. All sorts of people I had to interview with. And I think ultimately, the director, Joel Zwick, the live action director, he liked Boys Night Out. He gave me a shot. He gave me a shot at it. So I go to Warner's, and that was my first experience being hired as a director. And, it definitely, I want to say about directing. It's funny. It's like the job that everybody wants to do, but once you're doing it, you realize, geez, what did I get into? Because one of the aspects of directing is basically, whatever happens, it's your fault. You are blamed for everything and anything.
Yeah,
and you don't
that's usually the way it works.
And you don't really realize that. You don't really quite realize exactly everything that's going on. And there was another animation supervisor who I worked on it with, who the animation was done at Warner's, but since it was a Fox film, Chris Bailey worked for Fox, and he was involved in the project.
Chris has done a lot of stuff for Fox.
Yeah, he's continued on doing stuff for Fox. He worked for Fox. The work was done at Warner's, but he worked for Fox
What was the film?
It was for Fat Albert.
Fat Albert.
He was doing it on Fat Albert, to protect the Fox's interests. But I had a blast. Did I have a blast? The best part is the people that I got to have on my crew were incredible. Disney wasn't doing 2D. Everyone was available. My two right hands on that were Tony DeRosa and James Lopez. Tony is a longtime supervising animator at Disney, and Jamie Lopez, same as well. Both I'm working with today back at Disney's.
So how long did the Fat Albert gig last?
It was only like about 8 or 9 months. But it was it that long? All I know is it had no budget. It was like budgeted for like low budget TV animation, and we gave them Disney quality.
So you just pounded through and got it done.
We got it done, and we finished that up, and the movie came out, and the nicest compliment I got afterward, just Joel Zwick, when it was over, he said to me, wow, if I knew the animation was going to turn out this well, I would have planned for more of it in the movie. Because it kind of has it has an uneven amount. I mean, it really needed more, but I think they didn't have that much planned just in case it was it didn't work out.
Sure, exactly. If I'd known I was going to live so long, I would have taken better care of myself.
Exactly. So I made it through, and once again, I'm without a job.
It happens with animators.
Yep. And I call up my buddy Daryl Van Sitters, who I've done work with over the time, and just at that time, he was getting a gig from Imagineering for Disneyland's 50th anniversary of Donald Duck and Steve Martin. And I got to work in-house with him on that, and I set up the layouts for the shots and sort of worked as their lead animator.
And it was Disneyland the first 50 magical years.
Yes, Disneyland, the magical years. So much fun. I got my buddy Bill Waldman in as the other animator that worked in-house, and I worked with him and other folks doing freelance. Bill, great guy. We shared an office at Disney for a number of years, and we just had so much fun.
So what happened on that show? What were you animating?
Donald Duck.
Donald Duck?
Yeah,
not Mickey Mouse?
Mickey was not in it. It was Donald Duck. What more could you ask for? I love animating Donald Duck. But yeah, it was great with Bill, and we were working at Renegade's little place there. In
Glendale.
In Glendale, and Bill, we got to have Bill and I had so much fun working together at Disney. Sometimes when you share an office with somebody, it's almost like a marriage, because you can almost like finish each other's sentences and all sorts of stuff.
Now, you had a whole string of stuff after that. You did the Pink Panther and A Monkey's Tale and...
Oh, yeah, when you're unemployed, whatever you can do. I mean, it was interesting because there was no... I went back and forth. I still identified myself as being a hand-drawn guy. And when I left Disney, I just was not in a hurry to go back. In fact, I didn't think I would ever go back.
Yeah.
Over the circumstances, and when I left, it just was not a comfortable place. Time heals everything. So, The Monkey's Tale, oh gosh, during that time, now that I recall, I got a job teaching animation I was just trying to make money however I could. Got a job teaching animation at Cal Arts, doing that job. At the same time I was doing that, Bob Kurtz's Pink Panther, still finishing the 50 years at Disneyland.
So you had a lot of gigs overlapping.
Lots of overlapping because freelance is tough. That when you work at a studio and you get that weekly check, you've got to work sometimes 10 times harder for freelance,
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Sometimes with freelance, you'll get like that one golden gig that paid off well, but it was hard work. So I was basically, it was really Eric and I, because Eric and I were both unemployed essentially. Eric Goldberg. I mean, Eric actually, he did a lot of nice animation on Fat Albert, and after Fat Albert, we were both basically unemployed and
freelancing wherever you could get freelance.
We were basically helping each other out. He'd hook me up with a gig, I'd hook him up with a gig, we'd share a gig, because Eric, it's interesting. I can do a fairly good imitation of Eric's animation, but never it'll be like the master. It's funny. It's like we're really good friends and we talk. I'll say, I'll never, ever, ever be as good as you, but you know what?
Oh, you're you.
I'm me,
no,
and it's fun.
Need to be
and
him.
You know what? Sometimes if you're under the shadow of a giant, I'm like, oh, well, what a giant. But yeah, Eric, I can do a fairly good imitation of his animation. So we would share gigs, and I would, we would work together a lot. The Monkey's Tale job was a theme park ride show, which he directed, and I was a lead animator on that, and that was a tough gig. No money, so much footage. That was a tough job.
But then you swung into the Simpsons movie, which was a big hit.
Right before that, I did a little bit of CG work. Eric was directing a campaign of commercials for Disneyland's 50th anniversary, because, did a lot of that. And I went back to Digital Domain, and I helped out, and I animated some close-ups of Goofy and some stuff for that, doing CG. CG, I've always, it's funny, I never stayed in CG one long stretch, it's sort of like to really get my foothold in it, because I just sort of like, if the wind blows me that way, I'll do it, and then I sort of blow with the wind a bit too much to stay in one spot. So, then I find myself, okay, well, I have no work, what do I do? I call, I call David Silverman, and I said, David, you got any work for me? Just on the Simpsons TV show. I wasn't even aware of the movie. He said, yeah, come over. And Mark Kirkland gave me a few sequences to lay out. And when I came in to do it, David stopped me and said, here, let me see your drawings. And he took a look, and he seemed to give it a mild bit of approval. And a few weeks later, I get a call. I think I was doing some freelancing for Daryl Van Sitters in Flash or something. I don't remember. David calls and said, we want you to come on to the Simpsons movie. I'm like, a movie? Okay. So I go on there.
You bop right over.
The Simpsons movie's starting up, and, they were trying to find what the look of the animation would be. Trying to say, okay, well, what does this look like if we animate it more fully or more like the show? And, what it eventually turned out to be was like the show, but a
little more opulent.
Like the show, but with no mistakes and the closest perfection you could get.
Yeah.
The show at its most polished. Very good word. So, working on the Simpsons movie. No, over at Stars Film Roman.
And you're a lead animator.
Yeah, not my initial role on it. I was the only I was the only person that got the credit as lead animator. It was not my initial role. I was working on it, doing character layout and kind of animation, working with everybody, and some stuff started to happen on the movie where I don't know. Maybe am I supposed to be talking? I don't know. I don't think it's any secret or anything.
It's not a secret. And John Pomeroy ended up having an office over at Rough Draft.
Yeah, he was over at Rough
worked on
Draft.
it.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is I was over on the Film Roman side, and what was happening is the movie kept changing so much and so much and so much. Even though it was being technically animated in Korea, it wasn't going to get done, and they needed changes overnight. So eventually what happened was I kind of by osmosis ended up filling this void because probably in my directing and animation experience, the directors there are brilliant and really, really good. But the way that the show is done is they set it up here. Always been done. It's set up and finished in Korea. And I was one of the few people, if not the only, there was a few people, but I was the most experienced there. And how to actually, okay, when they say they want the scene in color tomorrow, I actually knew how to get it into color tomorrow.
You couldn't send it to Korea, you had to do it here.
You had to do it here. So we set up an in-house animation crew, and everyone was unemployed at the time as far as cleanup, because really, so the way it worked is we brought in scores of, tons, tens, I don't know, lots of cleanup artists, and I had an assistant, this fantastic girl, Chung-Ah. So fast, she's married to one of the directors there, Bob Anderson. And basically what I did is I just cranked animation and had people follow me up and clean up right behind me.
Right, so you could get it done and finish
just to get it
out.
done. It was a typical night where there was a complicated shot and the executives at Gracie wanted to see it in color in the morning.
My God.
What do? Well, we stayed all night, me and everyone, and I had to animate and divide into sections and hand it out to people, and it worked. Somehow it worked, and I did it because they were paying overtime, no questions asked. It was great.
They needed it done, and that picture still only cost $75 million at the end of the day.
So we animated a lot of scenes in-house. Up until the very last minute, we were able to. David Silverman was having animation changes done. Basically what we did is scenes were in color, but it's wrong. It needs to be redone. Well, we did printouts, reanimated it, changed it, and inked and painted it. So it was very ragtag. It was very wild, lots of craziness. It was crazy, but that's really was how the movie got done at the last minute.
Well, listen, I was walking through the facility all the time.
Yeah.
And I was aware of all that everybody was changing the sequences, because they did it the same way they do the TV show, which is constant changes until they get it to the way they want it.
The only way it got done, though, was to have an in-house. So, essentially, I ran the in-house animation unit here, and they gave me a nice credit. They gave me a lead animator credit, which was a nice... I was a sole credit because none of the other animators got that credit. That was a nice little concession.
Well, that was nice.
It was nice because I was not brought on to do that, and it just kind of happened. And then what happened after that? After that, I did some work on the TV show, worked for a really, really good director who was an assistant director on the movie, Ralph Sosa. I'll give Ralph a plug, my old buddy Ralph. Ralph draws those characters like nobody's business, and he helped me out a lot because, even though I had worked on the show, even though it was pretty solid by the fourth season, the characters still have changed. They're a lot more, enrooted what they are. So Ralph, I worked with Ralph and a little bit with Mark Kirkland, and then I got the call from Disney. Earlier before, I had met with Ron and John, and they had pitched Princess and the Frog to me. And
you were happy to come back.
I was. Making less money than on The Simpsons, but wanted to, Simpsons is a great show, and people say, oh, well, would you go back to it? And I'm like, oh, sure, I'll do anything. But, we're essentially doing layout. I'm doing layout, and
Yeah.
I want to,
Yeah.
I want to do full animation, So I come back and I had a blast on Princess and the Frog.
So what were your characters there?
Well, I wasn't a supervisor on that show. I worked with my old pal Eric, Lewis. It, hopefully, I'm not divulging too much, but I'll say it anyway. You can edit out. But Eric, keep giving Eric a plug. Eric really did a lot more on that picture than he was giving credit for. And actually, at the thank you at the wrap party, Ron and John really acknowledged Eric as being an uncredited third director, because Eric's that he was supervising was Lewis, but Eric really took on a much broader role on that film.
Yeah.
I mean, every musical sequence in there, Ron and John Eric actually directed the animation and all the musical sequences, because Eric understands rhythm and beats and music and how to direct animation to music better than anyone. And, Ron and John had him do that. So Eric really was a sequence director on that film.
Like William Wyler had Yakima Canuck
Yeah.
direct the chariot sequence in Ben-Hur, but
Yeah, it happens all over
It's a team
Hollywood.
effort.
It is a team effort. I was just reading about this book on Saul Bass. I mean, Saul Bass in the shower scene in Psycho. Saul Bass storyboarded the scene in Psycho, and he shot an animatic using what's her name? Janet Leigh's stand-in in the shower as like an animatic. He used her stand-in, and he shot a rough cut animatic and cut it together. And then they did, and Hitchcock actually let him say action and roll the film. So I mean, it happens all over the time. So Eric was really a sequence director. But the thing that led me to was because he was doing that, I got to animate I really did. I animated the bulk of Lewis the alligator.
terrific.
I mean, and fully under Eric's supervision. I mean, that's his. He directed that character, but Eric was doing so much more in terms of directing.
He had a lot more responsibilities.
Really, on Princess and the Frog, I got a chance. I animated probably a majority of the footage on Lewis, and got to do sequences and scenes of him that Eric would have done if he wasn't directing all the musical sequences. I had a blast on that film. Probably the most fun I've ever had working on anything, and there was a lot of excitement coming back because they were hiring 2D crews. 2D was coming back. It was very, very, very exciting. Snow Queen. Well, I'll stop talking about future productions. But
Winnie the Pooh. You worked on Winnie the Pooh and were an animator on that.
Yes, I was an animator on Winnie the Pooh. I worked a bit with Eric, but I mostly worked with Mark Henn. And I'll go a bit about Mark Henn. There was when I was teaching at CalArts, I'll go back up a little bit. When I was teaching at CalArts, there was a student of mine named Hyun-Min Lee, who, who's like the next great animator. It was her. Unbelievably talented. She's the only person that got hired out of CalArts, and she was an animator on Princess and the Frog, a full animator.
Right out of CalArts.
Yeah, I mean, there were other people out of CalArts, but she's the only one that made it to that status. She was that good. Now, she was doing her film called The Chestnut Tree. It didn't have a name at the time. Her thesis film at CalArts, and during that year, she just was, she was helping my wife and I do Monkey's Tale and the Three Caballeros. Oh yeah, I was Eric's lead animator on the Three Caballeros ride and in Florida, and Hyun-Min helped, and that was her first animation, and she was just loving it. I mean, Eric kind of took her under his wing too. I introduced her to Eric, and we both worked with her, and she became so good that she was animating on that stuff, but her CalArts student film wasn't getting done in time.
Too busy working
professionally. Now, her film kind of got done, and my wife helped her with story development on it, and it kind of got done. It was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, but it wasn't completely finished. So we said, you know what, this is a really, really nice film. Let's finish it properly, and we showed it to Don Hahn, who at the time was on leave from Disney. He's back there now, and working on the lot. Don Hahn said, let's do this. He just kind of dived into it, and Don came on as our executive producer and shepherded the film to completion.
Wow.
To use his people, his resources, his input, even down to minor things. And Jennifer and I worked on it as producers, and Don was the executive producer. And yeah, so I actually got to produce a short with Don Hahn. So we finished it, and it got nominated for another Annie Award, and
Terrific.
which really helped out Hyunmin. So concurrently, we were also working on a project called Pups of Liberty,
Yeah.
which my wife and I directed. Which at the time, Mark Henn was right before Princess and the Frog and the Goofy thing. He just hadn't done 2D in a long time, and he's a huge history buff. And he actually got his warm-up work done on those films. He animated about half of Pups of Liberty, which is a 15-minute personal short that we made about the American Revolution. And you know, he is amazing. And Mark, you know,
Terrific animator.
Oh yeah, he's a terrific animator. So he collaborated with us on that project, and we're actually going out this Wednesday to New York to pitch it to some investors, because we want to try and expand it into a feature or just a longer series for classrooms, because it's an educational piece, and you know, educational stuff is sometimes hard to
Now,
pitch.
has the original Pups of Liberty, has that been circulated, distributed, and all that
Not
good
not
stuff?
distributed. It's played in festivals, and it was nominated for an Annie Award as well. So we got 3 Annie nominations, and we are this close to actually finishing its final post, but we ran out of money. So money was kind of our enemy. My wife and I spent all our money on this stuff. We ran out of money. Money's
Well, that's
money's,
kind of...
and we had, you know, but yeah, it's you can the trailer. It's online, and it's very, very close. It just needs final sound, but we're actually working with a group called MPI in New York, and they're giving us funds to finish it up and get it in the classrooms. But anyway, I sort of really, you know, got a nice friendship going with Mark Henn from that, and I worked with Mark animating on Pooh. So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about. I talked a little bit about always working and always doing all these shorts on the side. We did Boys Night Out, Chestnut Tree, and Pups of Liberty. So we did that stuff. So I worked on Pooh, had a blast on Pooh. And
what was your character there?
Well, Mark was the supervisor on Pooh, and I animated quite a bit on Pooh. I'd say the stuff that I'm most proud of that film is Ruben Aquino did some great stuff on that sequence too. Is the Everything is Honey sequence where he has the dream and everything turns into honey. I animated a lot of the more complex shots on that. So that was fun. Pooh was fun. What else is going on? My mind is dead. I'm kind of rambling. Oh yeah, I'll talk about Candyman a little bit.
Talk a little bit about Candyman, and then we will. Then I have my wrap-up question.
Yeah, have I gone over an hour and a half?
You're a little over, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm sorry it was so long.
No, that's all right, because it
Okay.
doesn't matter. They go as long as they go.
As long as it wants. Well, you know, bear with me if you want. Yeah, I guess I should go to work, shouldn't I? But I'll just wrap up really quick and talk a little bit about Candyman.
Yeah, you told me that story. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's
about
actually
your father.
it's available on Netflix, streaming right now. It's doing very well on Netflix. I produced a documentary feature about my dad, who founded and created Jelly Belly Jelly Beans in 1976. And through a series of improbably bad decisions and acts of generosity, ended up with absolutely nothing. And he, you know, and when people would, I kind of kept it a secret a little bit, you know, because, you know, it's embarrassing because my dad, you know, that happened. But, you know, not embarrassing. That's not the right word, Dad. I'm not embarrassed. The point is, it's just like, you know, kids wouldn't believe me because my dad didn't own it anymore, and the money was gone. And it was sort of like a thing where people would ask me a million questions, and I wouldn't even begin to describe what happened, because it's a very complex, very, very fascinating story of the dark and light side of the American dream. So this way I could say, here, watch the movie. And if you don't want to buy the DVD, which is available on Amazon, if you don't want to buy the DVD, stream it on Netflix.
Yeah, it's basically the story, as you described it to me, of a man who founded a sort of an iconic candy, and it slipped away from him at some point.
Yep, and you just got to watch the movie and see it. It's quite a fascinating movie. And just to like wrap it up, I mean, I'm still back at Disney, and I'm working on some upcoming features, which I can't talk about. But
So we won't.
We won't.
I have one question, though, that I ask everybody. Name your top 4 or 5 most inspirational, iconic pieces of animation that you either worked on or that inspired you and you had nothing to do with. Like
Sure.
you saw it as a kid and went, that drove you into animation or pulled you into animation.
Yeah, Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket, big Pinocchio fan. I like the mushrooms in Fantasia.
There's 2.
That's 2. What else do I like? Let's see. That's 2. Too much to mention. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Pinocchio's my number 1. Later on in life, I have to say, Mermaid was very, very inspirational. Even though that's like a modern film, Mermaid had something for it, which I think inspired a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought Eric's work in The Genie was terrific. I guess I still think Snow White is a terrific film. Let's see, is that 5 already?
That's 5.
I'll say 5. That's stuff I like.
Well,
So-
thank you, Mr. Klein, for doing this.